Warning. Because people are so stupid these days, I feel it is my duty to inform you that you may need some discretion if you're choosing to watch this video. To be honest, I personally don't believe anybody should be veiled from the cold, hard truth of what our world has become. Nor do I believe it is fair on the victims in this video who have been horrifically scarred due to other monstrous people. Why should I warn you about the fact I will be showing you their images? They have to face it daily. They don't warn people when they're leaving the house. Of course they bloody don't. Either way, you've been told. Take what I've said however you want. Many people suffer. In fact, humans suffer in various ways on a daily basis. Whether it's stubbing your toe on the bathroom door, catching a horrible cold, or being diagnosed with a terminal illness, no matter what it is, to suffer is part of our everyday life, in some form or another. But what about true horrific suffering? A form of suffering that never truly goes away. Something that will stay with a person for the rest of their life, all because of somebody else's evil actions. Today we're going to address something that seems to have become some new trend, an act so cold and calculating, the very thought of it will send chills up your spine. Acid attacks. The act of pouring acid onto someone, usually their face, with the intention of causing excruciating pain and horrific disfigurement. I am JJ, and here are 5 accounts of true horrific acid attacks. Number 1. Naomi Oni. On the 29th of December 2012, during the festive season of Christmas and New Year, Naomi Oni, 20, was on her way home from her job at a lingerie boutique in Westfield Shopping Centre in Stratford, East London. Hurriedly making her way home to her family, who was celebrating the festivities, Naomi attempted to lighten her mood by calling her boyfriend at the time as she made the busy commute. It was whilst talking with him that she became aware of a woman wearing Muslim attire following closely behind her. "I'd felt a presence," Naomi recalls. "I remember seeing a woman's cold eyes piercing into mine. The rest of her face was obscured by her veil. I didn't want to stare back, so I turned away. Then I felt the splash. I took a big intake of breath, then screamed. I thought I was going to be killed. My face and tongue were burning. I didn't have time to feel fear. I ran and didn't look back. I felt it was the end, that I was on the brink of death. I screamed as loud as I could to deter this woman from chasing me and ran until I got to my front door. I could feel a scalding sensation and there was a chemical smell. I hammered on my front door, shouting, 'Acid! Acid!' My mum opened it. Her jaw dropped. I was screaming, 'My face is burning up!' There was steam coming off of me. I was shaking with shock. Naomi's attacker was in fact not a random stranger, but Mary Connier, a woman Naomi had deemed to be one of her closest friends. Connier had intentionally worn traditional Muslim clothing to disguise her identity in order to complete her cold and callous attack. Her reason for committing such an act? She had been driven wild with jealousy at Naomi's good looks, popularity, and bubbly personality. Mary Connier is now serving 12 years in prison and has shown no remorse, whilst Naomi Oni is trying to rebuild her life. Over 5 years later, and after multiple medical and cosmetic procedures, Naomi has said there have been no boyfriends since her attack, and her longed-for career as a makeup artist has stalled due to companies selling perfection being unwilling to employ someone with disfigurements such as these. Despite all of this, however, Naomi is quoted as stating, in regards to her ex-friend and attacker, "I do forgive her. I owe myself the freedom to move on, but I still think she is a callous, vindictive person, a complete coward who betrayed me." Number 2. Andreas Christoforous. In December 2014, 30-year-old businessman Andreas Christoforous was left blind and facially disfigured after a case of mistaken identity resulted in him having battery acid poured over him on his own doorstep in Truro, Cornwall. The attacker, David Phillips, 49, of Hastings, believed Andreas had sexually assaulted someone he knew, and so travelled to his home to serve him one of the most vile, detestable punishments any person could receive. Andreas recalls, "I opened the door as you would normally do. Then, after one sudden motion, he said, 'This is for you, mate.' The pain was inexplicable. It's nothing like I have ever felt. You can't even comprehend, but I knew straight away that it was acid. My t-shirt dissolved. It was like a waistcoat. There was no doubt in my mind." Andreas is still in the process of undergoing various procedures for his injuries. However, his suffering was not just restricted to the physical attack. Due to the false allegations raised by Phillips about his believed involvement in a sexual assault, Andreas was forced to endure his own police investigation into his life while struggling through an already horrific nightmare. Phillips was given a life sentence for the attack and was advised he must serve a minimum of 7 years and 68 days. Andreas states, "It's happened. What's happened has happened, and nothing is going to change that. You deal with what is in front of you and you move on. I've lost a year of my life at the age of 30. It's significant. I'm not going to lose any more time. Time is precious for me." Number 3. Laxmi. "I kept screaming for help, but no one stepped forth," 16-year-old Laxmi said, describing the horrific moment she realised the flesh on her face was melting away after a cold and evil attack. An attack which was orchestrated by a man who was angered that Laxmi had rejected his romantic advances. She said, "I was waiting for a bus in a crowded central Delhi area in daytime. He approached me with his brother's girlfriend. Before I knew it, they had flung me onto the road, pinned me down, and threw acid on my face. I kept screaming for help, but no one stepped forth. Everyone ran in the opposite direction. I could feel my flesh burning, and I covered my eyes with my arms. Within seconds, her face had virtually gone, and she needed 11 surgical procedures." She added, "I had lost my face, my ear had melted, and both my arms were charred black. A politician's driver took me to a hospital where I was to stay for the next 10 weeks. I saw myself in the mirror at the end of the 10 weeks and couldn't believe what the acid had done to me. The doctors had to remove the entire skin from my face and keep it bandaged. I've already had 7 surgeries and need at least 4 more before I can go in for plastic surgery, provided I can afford it. I learnt to live with the physical pain, but what hurt more was the way the society reacted. My own relatives stopped seeing me, as did my friends. I stayed indoors almost all the time for 8 years. My main attacker was out on bail within a month, and he soon got married. He returned to a normal life within a month. I tried to pick up a job, but nobody was willing to hire me. Some said people will get scared if they see you. Others said they will call back, but of course, the phone never rang. I tried BPOs, banks, and beauty parlours, but all I got was rejection. Nobody wants to hire acid victims because of the way they look. Number 4. Adele Bellis. Back in 2014, Adele Bellis, 22, of Lowestoft, Suffolk, was waiting for a bus to her workplace, where she worked as a beautician. It was here that 29-year-old Jason Harrison doused her in sulfuric acid. Incredibly, her attacker was only sentenced to 4 years and 4 months imprisonment, and he is already free and walking the streets again after serving just over half of his sentence. The complexity of this case, and what led to just a comparatively small sentence, is that the mastermind behind the attack was Adele's abusive ex-partner, Anthony Riley. He had coerced Harrison into completing this disturbing act on his behalf. As a result, Harrison is now free after just 2.5 years behind bars, despite maiming a young woman by melting her ear and half of her scalp off. Adele states, "I would say this crime was worse than murder. There were a few times in my recovery when I thought, why didn't you kill me? I would rather he had shot me. The amount of pain and trauma I went through, then the years of recovery, it's such a long process. I have not been told where he is, only that he is 200 miles away. When I heard he was coming out, I felt vulnerable, helpless. There was nothing I could do. All I can do is try and get on with my life. We victims are disfigured for life. We have to live with this. They should get a longer sentence in prison. I think there should be a set sentence in place, a hard sentence. We are alive, but we have to live with the trauma. I still have half a head of hair and no ear. I'm still having counselling and treatment." Incredibly, Adele is sympathetic towards Harrison, as she states she is aware that her ex-partner forced Harrison to carry out the attack. She also received a letter from Harrison, who had later written to her and apologised for what he had done. Anthony Riley was jailed for life for being the mind behind the menace, and was ordered to serve a minimum of 13 years of his prison term. Number 5. Mark van Dongen. In 2015, Dutch engineer Mark van Dongen, 29, was fast asleep in his bed when Belina Wallace hurled acid over him. Screaming in agony, he staggered out into the street, where he was discovered by neighbours who called the emergency services. During the time of the attack, Belina Wallace said, "If I can't have you, no one can." And then it happened. The attack was so aggressive, Mark was left with a missing eye, ear and leg, and paralysed from the neck down, all because the attacker was upset that he had left her for another woman. When Mark's father, Kees, was escorted to the ward that his son was on at Southmead Hospital in Bristol, he thought an error had been made. "We entered the ward. There were 6 rooms, one next to another. We looked in every room and we looked at every person in bed. At first I said, 'There's been a mistake. Mark is not here.' The first room I had looked in, I failed to recognise my own son. His injuries were unbelievable." The staff at the hospital confessed they had never witnessed injuries so horrific. The burns left by the attack covered 25% of Mark's body, and most of the damaged skin was surgically removed. His face was greatly scarred. He lost the sight of his left eye and almost all of the sight in his right. Following the attack, after arriving at the hospital, Mark admitted that he simply could not live with the injuries. The thought of spending the rest of his life unable to move and being left with virtually no face. He would scream and plead, "Kill me now. If my face is going to be left looking like this, I don't want to live." After the attack by Wallace, Mark would spend 4 months in a coma, having to be fed via a tube and able to breathe only via a ventilator, with his left leg needing to be removed. Upon waking, he was only able to move his mouth and tongue, the rest of his body completely paralysed. He would communicate by sticking out his tongue when his father pointed to letters on an alphabet board. He eventually regained his speech through a speaking valve. His father said, "I stayed by his bedside all the time. It was very bad. At one point he no longer responded to anything. He seemed to be falling into a hole. I stood by his ear and shouted really loudly. He seemed to come back." He described his son as a loving person. "He was a gentleman, everyone's friend," he said. "I often told him, 'Mark, think about yourself.' He was actually too good for this world, too kind. When he was a child, he used to play marbles. When he won 4, 5 marbles and his opponent was crying, he would hand them back. That was Mark all over." Some time after, he was transferred to a care home in Gloucester, as it became clear that Mark would require a lifetime of constant, dedicated care. His father asked him, "Would you like me to help you out of the transfer?" Mark said, Dad, I would like to do it myself, so at least I have got that bit of independence. He would be examined by 3 different consultants who declared that this was a case of unbearable physical and psychological suffering and agreed that he met the criteria for euthanasia under Belgian law. He went from his home in Bristol to a hospital in Belgium and was euthanized on the 2nd of January 2017. Belina Wallace would become the first person to be sentenced to life for this type of attack. She was cleared of murder, but found guilty for throwing a corrosive substance with intent. Your intention was to burn, disfigure and disable Mark van Dongen so that he would not be attractive to any other woman, the judge said. This story in particular could have been much longer, and due to time restraints I had to strategically make it much shorter. I will be documenting the entire story in a future video, so please stay tuned for that. And that leads us to the end of our 5 truly disturbing cases of acid attacks. For anyone that friends me on Facebook, you know I'm not one to hold back on my opinions. I believe in free speech. I don't believe in extreme political correctness. I've got to say though, any person who could ever decide that maiming somebody in this way as a justified punishment for anything, and I do mean anything, is a complete, disgusting, vile human being. The fact that anyone could decide to dish out such an extreme method of torture that is forever painful and can never be escaped just completely stuns me. I don't get people at the best of times, which to be honest I'm pretty glad about, but I really don't get things like this. Anyway, rant over. We'd love to know your views, so please comment down below. We're also always looking for new content, so if you have a story you'd like to share or a video idea, drop us an email at the address provided. If you enjoyed today's video, please like, and if you've not already done so, subscribe and remember to ding that bell to receive notifications so you never miss a moment with me. We are also on Facebook, and if you're really savvy, you might just discover my personal account on there so you can find out about my daily ramblings, if you're really that interested. For now, however, JJ out.